We're so glad that you're tuning in to listen to this sermon. It's part of our weekly worship service here at LOPC, and our hope is that as you listen to it, you'll hear God's word to you.
You know, some people don't believe in God. Not a surprise, that statement. I think we all know people who don't believe in God. And they don't believe in God for a whole lot of different reasons. I know over the years, I've had so many experiences where I have been in conversation with a person and it's come out that I'm a clergy person, and pretty quickly they'll say something like, well, you know, I'm not really a religious person. I don't believe in God. And they'll say that not because they want to be rude or not because they want to sort of disrespect what I believe, but they simply, want me to know where they're coming from. And I think they also want to establish a little bit of a boundary between us, right? Because they're just not necessarily willing to have a conversation about that. But often really wonderful conversations ensue. Because people don't believe in God for a whole lot of different reasons. Some people don't believe in God because of the pain and suffering that exists in the world. I mean, how can that be reconciled with the existence of God? And that objection usually results in a conversation about the nature of evil, where it comes from, and how God might work in the world in a way that preserves human agency and our ability to make choices. And then there are people who don't believe in God because of religion. Either they object to the specific premises of a particular religion, or they have been harmed or injured by religious people somewhere along the way. And usually that concern leads to a conversation about why God would choose to work through flawed and fallible people. And also, what is the basis for us to make any claims at all about who God is and how God expects us to live? And then finally, there are some people who don't believe in God because they simply lack proof. Now, these are folks who tend to operate with a naturalistic or a materialist approach to things. They're willing to trust what they can empirically prove or what they experientially come to believe is true. And so they might be willing to believe in the existence of God, but they simply lack enough proof to get to that point. And in many cases, they'll actually express their sort of sadness that they haven't found a way to get to that point. A famous example of this concerns William James, the philosopher and psychologist who studied religion extensively in the last century. His book, Varieties of Religious Experience, is a classic, and many of us read it in college. But even though he studied religion, even though he studied faith extensively, William James he carried with him a sense of sadness that he himself was never able to get to the point where he could believe in the existence of God. He actually expressed this in a really touching way in a letter that he wrote to a friend of his. We read there, "I have no message of my own. I have no living sense of commerce with a God. I envy those who have. For I know the box of energies that it opens to them, but I myself, I fear, almost as much a musical as a religious non-receiver." Isn't that interesting? William James refers to his inability to perceive or to believe in the existence of a God as almost an inability to hear music, which he in the letter also acknowledges. He just doesn't have musical gifts or aptitude at all. So he thinks of faith as belief in the existence of God that he just can't perceive, but maybe others can. And that actually left him with a sense of sadness. And this idea that God is constantly trying to reveal God's self through nature, that God is not present so much specifically in nature, but God is speaking to us or calling to us through nature. Maybe not with audible words or maybe a voice that we can hear, but that if we look, if we're careful, we can perceive God's presence through the beauty and the intricacy, the orderliness of nature. This is something that the scriptures refer to time and again. A great example comes from the 19th Psalm, where we read the following. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims God's handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard, and yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. So the psalmist lived in a world where nature was constantly communicating, pointing to the presence of God. If people were willing to look and examine the natural world, it always and ever points to God. This past week, I read a book called God, the Science, the Evidence. And in it, two authors who are French, they're engineers by training, they go through all of the scientific proof that we have, not really proof so much, but all of the evidence that we have scientifically, which can open us up to the possibility that God exists. And it's really a remarkably reasoned book. It's not without some controversy, but in this book, they actually take a chapter and they have quotes from over 100 different scientists who over the course of the past 100 years have found their scientific inquiry, their close examination of nature, their deep exploration of the intricacy and the orderliness and the elegance of the world that we inhabit has actually made them more inclined to believe in the existence of God. And one of these scientists is quoted as saying the following, and I think this is quite instructive. This is from Carlo Rubbia, who's was a distinguished physicist at Harvard. And he wrote the following. In considering nature, we find that it has an order far too precise to have been determined by chance, from confrontations between forces that we, physicists, continue to maintain. However, I believe that the existence of a pre-established order of things is more evident among us than elsewhere. We come to God by the path of reason. Others follow an irrational path. Now, maybe he's talking about we theologians there. I don't know. But Carlo Rubbia, through his exploration of the natural world, discerned an order there and an elegance and a beauty and too many fine points of precision that can be explained just by chance. It actually made him more willing to believe in the existence of God. And this is a conviction that, as I said, we find all through the scriptures. The Apostle Paul, for instance, believed so strongly that nature points us to the existence of God, he believed it was quite impossible for anyone who carefully looked at nature to come away with anything other than an increased ability to believe in the existence of God. In Romans chapter 1, he wrote the following. Ever since the creation of the world, God's eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things that God has made. So nature points us, doesn't prove it, but it points us towards the existence of God. And if we are willing to believe in the existence of God, it carries with it some very important benefits. The two primary ones are a sense of purpose and also of God's providence. First up is purpose. The simple truth of the matter is that if we operate with a purely naturalistic or materialist worldview, there is no ultimate purpose that we can discern from the world that we inhabit. It just doesn't exist. This world exists by chance. It operates according to natural laws, and one day it will experience entropic death, and that's it. There is no purpose. There is no meaning, at least in an ultimate sense. Science can tell us that we have a biological purpose, and that is to survive and reproduce. So if you're here today and you have survived to this point and reproduced, you have fulfilled your biological purpose. But that's not enough, is it? What about an ultimate purpose? Well, philosophy has always understood that everything exists for a reason and a purpose. How do we come to an understanding of the purpose of the world that we live in, the universe, even our very own existence? Well, that has to be revealed to us, the scriptures tell us, by God. Only the Creator can tell us why we're here. And as we delve into the scriptures, what we find there is a rich witness that you and I were created as part of an infinitely large universe that was produced out of love by God so that we can be in relationship, having been created in the image of God. And God's love and care extends to the whole creation. And we are called to love and care for one another, and also to care for the creation that God has very temporarily entrusted to our care. In one of our confessional documents, the Confession of 1967, I think this truth is quite eloquently stated for us. We read there, "We believe that God has created the world of space and time to be the sphere of his dealings with humankind. In its beauty and vastness, sublimity and awfulness, order and disorder, the world reflects, to the eye of faith, the majesty and the mystery of its creator. We believe that God has created us for personal relationship in which we may respond to the love of the Creator. Life is a gift to be received with gratitude and a task to be pursued with courage." That's our purpose. To love God, heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love our neighbor as ourselves. And not only can only the Creator give us a sense of purpose, but we also receive the gift of providence. In the Christian tradition, providence, the doctrine of providence, has always been tied to the doctrine of creation. Because if God created everything that is, and if there is a purpose to it and a plan, then we who are claimed and called by God are very much part of that plan and that purpose. The doctrine of providence does not communicate that, somehow we are going to be free from the difficulties and the hardships of life. No. It means something far deeper and more profound than that. And that is that whatever happens to us in life, it's not random, it's not purely by chance, but that God is at work in that for the good of the world and for our good. Providence is something that, it embraces us in the dark, hard times of life. Again, it doesn't mean that all of our challenges and problems and worries are going to be whisked away, but it means we can know that God is with us and that there is a plan and a purpose being worked out that is far greater than we, and that God knows us and calls us and claims us by name. Again, we find this expressed, I think, wonderfully in our confessional documents, in this case from the Heidelberg Catechism, which was a catechism or a teaching document written in Germany shortly after the Protestant Reformation. And because it's a catechism, it's written in question and answer format. And we read this there. "What do you understand by the providence of God? Well, the almighty and ever-present power of God, by which God upholds as with his hand heaven and earth and all creatures, and so rules them, that leaf and blade, rain and drought, fruitful and lean years, food and drink, health and sickness, prosperity and poverty, all things, in fact, come to us not by chance, but by his fatherly hand." Now, I know providence is hard for us to wrap our minds around, but it's possible because the God who created all things has made himself known to us and has claimed us as part of his plan for the healing and the wholeness of the whole creation. And these two ideas, that we have a purpose because God the Creator has revealed it to us, and we are providentially held in God's care, these two things also frame our understanding of what it means to come to the table. Because in this table, we encounter once again Jesus Christ, our risen Lord. that he is an extension into the human condition of God's very presence, and that he came to remind us of our purpose. He summed it up so eloquently. You and I were created by God to love God with heart, soul, mind, and strength, to love our neighbors as ourselves, and to take care of the good creation that God has entrusted to our care. And it's through his life and death and resurrection, you and I are forgiven, and we're called to a new life that is fueled and formed by this purpose. And so as we come to this table today, we ask the question, am I loving God with all that I have? Is there some part of me that is not praising and glorifying God as my creator? And is there some way perhaps that God might be calling me to love someone else at a deeper and a more profound level? And then there's the issue of providence. We need to remember that Jesus is the host here. And he is the one who declared to his disciples and also to us that there's no place we can go. And there's nothing that can happen to us that he is not present with us in, and also will guide us through. And so you might be here today wrestling with some problem or some challenge or some dilemma that seems totally perplexing. Or maybe it's a challenge you just don't know how to face. This table has always been a place for us to come as people of faith and believe in God's providential care, even though we can't always understand it, even though it's always beyond our ken, to know that he meets us here to give us what we need to make it through the week.
We invite you to get to know our community better. Take a moment and subscribe to our YouTube page, or you can go to our website, lopc.org, and find additional information there. Know that there's a place for you in our community of faith, and you'll be welcome here.